Today we're going to talk about slope and slope as a rate of change. The slope of a non-vertical line is the ratio of vertical change, which is also known as the rise, to the horizontal change, which is the run. Hopefully you remember in Algebra 1 the slope formula, and this is the formula that we use to find the slope if we know 2 points on the line. 2 points on the line gives you the slope. It is, as you can see, the formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. The change in y is the rise, and the change in x is the run. Rise because y on the y-axis goes up and down, and run because x-axis goes from left to right. So the first thing I want you to be able to do is, if you're given 2 points on a line, you should find the slope of that line. The slope passing through -3, 5, and 2, 1. So we're going to use our formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we've got 1 minus 5 divided by 2 minus -3. 1 minus 5 is -4. 2 minus -3 is 2 plus 3, or 5. So the slope of the line passing through -3, 5, and 2, 1 is -4/5. Let's draw a picture of this. -3, 5, it would be around right there, and 2, 1 would be here. The line that passes through these 2 points looks like this. The slope of this line is -4/5. Notice that the line falls as you read the graph from left to right. And also notice that this is shown in the fact that the slope is negative. If we look at the graph, you can see that to get from this point to this point here, we have to go down 4 units and then to the right 5 units. Down 4 and over 5 gets me to another point on that line. So the slope is kind of represented in two things. It's the steepness of the line, and it's also the rate of change. Every time the x increases by 5, the y is going down 4. Okay. Now we're going to do another example. We're going to find the slope again, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. -1 minus -4, which is plus, over 3 minus -2, which is also plus. So we've got 3/5. Let's draw a picture of this also. If we plot these 2 points, -2, 4, and 3, -1, and we look at the line that passes through these 2 points, notice that the line rises from left to right. And if we start it from one point on the left and we go to another point on the right, we have to go up 1, 2, 3, and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get to another point. So every time the x increases by 5, the y increases by 3. Okay, so we have a little synopsis here. A line with a positive slope is going to rise from left to right. A line with a negative slope is going to fall from left to right. And the little m right here, that represents slope. Anytime you see that little m, is always represents slope. A line with a slope of 0 is horizontal, and a line with an undefined slope is vertical. You probably recall this from Algebra 1. How do I know that the slope is 0? You're going to see something like 0 divided by 5. That's 0. And lines that are horizontal have a slope of 0. And how do I know a line has an undefined slope? You're going to see something like this. When you calculate the slope formula, it's going to be 5 divided by 0. That's an undefined slope. So all vertical lines will have that slope, or no slope, undefined. Just remember, the only number we cannot divide by is 0. So that's why the 5 divided by 0 is undefined, and 0 divided by 5 is 0. Okay, so without graphing, tell whether the line through 2, -1 and 2, 5 rises, falls, is horizontal or vertical. Okay, so one way that you can tell this is by finding the slope of the line. So if we find the slope of the line, 5 minus -1 over 2 minus 2, we see that we get 6 over 0. So that tells me that the slope of this line is undefined. And if I know that the slope of this line is undefined, then I know that my line is vertical. Another way that I could tell that this line is vertical is if we look at the two ordered pairs, 2, -1 and 2, 5. Notice how one of the coordinates does not change. 2, -1, 2, 5. If I look at a graph of this, 2, -1 and 2, 5, if I plot those points, they both have the same x value. So they're both along the same vertical line. Alright, tell which line is steeper. So in general, the steeper the slope, the bigger the slope, the steeper the line. As the slope gets bigger, the line gets steeper. If we look at this on our graphing calculator, we can take a look at this on our graphing calculator. We can look at it, compare a couple of lines. For instance, let's go to y equals, to erase all this. Okay, so if we look at y equals 2x, we see that we have a line with a certain steepness. Okay, now as we make that slope bigger, if we look at y equals 4x, then the line gets steeper. Okay, so the bigger the slope, the steeper the line. Now, if I look at y equals 2x, there's my line that has a slope of a certain steepness. Now, if I go back to y equals and I look at y equals 0.2x, I made it really small. If I make it really small, then it becomes kind of flat. In fact, the closer the slope gets to 0, the closer the line becomes, the line becomes more horizontal, because remember, a horizontal line has a slope of 0. So if this line right here, y equals 0.2x, that line is pretty flat, pretty close to a slope of 0. So if we have two lines where all we know is 2 points on those lines, then we can use the slopes to determine which one is going to be steeper. Remember, because the bigger the number, the steeper the slope. So we're going to find line 1, the slope of line 1, and then we're going to find the slope of line 2. And we're going to determine whichever one is bigger has the steeper slope. 7 minus 3 over 4 minus 2 gives me 4 over 2, which is 2. So line 1 has a slope of 2. Then we do 5 minus 2 over 4 minus -1, which is plus. 5 minus 2 is 3, 3/5. So line 1 has a steeper slope because its slope is, this is a steeper line, because its slope is bigger. Be careful when the slope is negative, like for instance, if one slope was -2/3 and one slope was -3/5, you have to figure out first which number is bigger, and the more negative it is, the smaller it is. So negative, this is about -0.6 repeating, and 3/5 is 0.6 exactly, without the repeating. So if that looks like that, then -3/5 is a bigger number, even though the number is smaller, but it's negative, so you have to be careful with that. Alright, two lines are parallel if and only if they have the same slope. Two lines are perpendicular if and only if their slopes are negative reciprocals of each other. So how do we know if two lines are parallel or perpendicular? Go back up, make sure you can read that again. Two lines are parallel if they have the same slope. Two lines are perpendicular if their slopes are negative reciprocals. So here's line 1 and line 2. How do we know whether they are parallel, perpendicular, or neither one? Let's use their slopes to determine, because I know if their slopes would be the same, then they would be parallel. So line 1 has a slope of negative 2/3. Line 2 has a slope of positive, that's wrong, positive 3/2. So negative 2/3 and positive 3/2 are negative reciprocals of each other. Negative means change the sign. Negative reciprocals of each other. So these two lines are perpendicular. Remember, perpendicular means they're going to intersect and form right angles. Their slopes have, lines that do this have special slopes. They're negative reciprocals of each other.